We can all agree that Clair Obscur throws a lot of concepts at you for you to understand. I've spent the better part of 2025 studying and researching this game's narrative, and I can tell you that doing so is akin to finding a Russian nesting doll that is seemingly infinite. It feels like there is no end to the layers of symbolisms and meanings, but I do believe there are some fundamentals that a lot of players are misunderstanding. One huge one I've noticed in particular is that there's a pretty widespread misconception around Chroma, so I figured I'd take a moment to do a class on Chroma. We'll be discussing what it is, what it does, its use cases, and what it actually symbolizes. Obviously this requires full spoilers, so be warned and click off the video if you haven't finished the game yet. But without further ado, let's get into it. I will start by defining what chroma is in the simplest sense. Whenever a painter creates something within a canvas, they are imbued with chroma. We can consider chroma to be the energy that gives them life. So everything that is painted requires chroma to live. Think of it like a life force mana hybrid, right? So something to keep in mind is that chroma in essence is the extension of a painter's will. So to a degree, the painter can actually paint a directive into the chroma for how they want the chroma to behave. Think about it like a pilot programming an autopilot for a plane to ensure that it cruises to a specific location without them directly controlling the plane. Allow me to elucidate this notion by going over a few chroma use cases. So when a gestural passes away, their chroma returns to the sacred river, and the river eventually creates a new gestural from the recycled chroma. The reason that the Gestral's chroma does this is because of the original or real Verso. He gifted the sacred river to the Gestral so that they would always have new beginnings. So in this scenario, the real Verso manipulated the Gestral's chroma to ensure that they would have a natural life and death cycle, rather than a scenario where the Gestrals were just ceaselessly immortal with the same identities. I did a whole video here that kind of delves into the reasoning and thought processes that I believe led the real Verso to do this, but again, this is just an example of how the painter dictates the behavior of the chroma. To give another example, let's talk about Nevrons. Actually, one of the biggest confusions that I see for most players post playthrough is they ask, if painted Renoir is on the side of the paintress and it turns out that the Lumirans want the same thing the paintress wants, why is he killing expeditioners instead of allying with them to go after the curator, who is the real one who is erasing Lumirans? The answer is chroma. So when expeditioners are killed by Nevrons, their chroma is forced to stay within their bodies. However, when they die from anything that isn't a Nevron, their chroma instead returns to the paintress. So to unpack this, as we know, Clea is essentially the source of the Nevrons, as she is forcing the painted Clea to manufacture them to help the real Renoir's war effort against the paintress. So the directive that Clea gave her chroma, and by extension the Nevrons within the canvas, was to help Renoir, and she does this by making sure that anything the Nevrons kill prevents the chroma from returning back to the paintress. So this weakens the paintress by gradually removing chroma from her grasp. Remember, chroma is akin to life force or mana. So pay attention here. The reason that painted Renoir is killing expeditioners is because in doing so, he ensures that their chroma returns to the paintress instead of being removed from her grasp. In other words, killing the expeditioners equals giving the paintress a life or mana potion to restore her health bars just a little bit. So this is the most simple way for the painted Renoir to support the paintress's war against the real Renoir. You might think to yourself, well then why doesn't he just go to Lumiere and kill everyone? I would just remind you that the paintress's ultimate goal is to preserve life and save the Lumirans, so this would go against that goal. Expeditioners are a bit different because they are people who are already soon to die anyways, and they all go to that continent with willingness and acceptance of their fate. The other reason painted Renoir doesn't try to ally with the expeditioners aside from chroma is because of the events in the era of the Fracture and Expedition Zero. Long story short, he tried to tell the Lumirans that the paintress wasn't the villain and none of them believed him. Black Coffee Breakfast and I are working on a comprehensive video around the events and gray areas from that era of time in the canvas, so don't worry, I will tell you the long story too in a future upload. Definitely subscribe and keep an eye out for that upload within the next few weeks. If you don't know Coffee, when it comes to Clair Obscur, he's your go-to guy if you want to learn new stuff about the game that will increase your appreciation for it, so definitely subscribe to him too. Now, the last use case of Chroma that I want to go over is what happens when a Nevron dies. When we destroy a Nevron, their Chroma is harvested by the Expeditioners. From a gameplay perspective, we see that our Expeditioners use Chroma as a currency with the Gestural Merchants. Speaking of harvested Chroma, this is fundamentally the purpose of Gustav's Lumina Converter and why it makes such a difference in the ability of the Lumirans to fight back. The Lumina Converter absorbs the Chroma from dead Nevrons and allows that power to be repurposed on behalf of the Expeditioners. It's a similar concept to the Painter's usage of Chroma, though it's on a much smaller scale, of course. The ironic reason that our party becomes so buffed and is able to fell Axons and fight with Painters is actually because of the fact Painted Renoir wiped the entire expedition. You have to remember that Gustav's Lumina Converter was meant to share the harvested Chroma across the entire expedition. Instead, they all died except for 4, meaning that the harvested Chroma was split across 4 people instead of the 30 to 50 people who embarked on the expedition. Think of it this way. Instead of the Nevrons and the Painters and Renoir having to contend with 50 duck-sized horses, they instead needed to fight 4 horse-sized ducks. If you're unfamiliar with that meme, try, instead of 50 men, they have to fight 4 Super Saiyan gorillas, but I digress. Next, I want to briefly explain the symbolism that exists in Chroma. So, Chroma comes from the Latinized form of the ancient Greek word chroma, which is a word with multiple meanings, but in this context, the primary relevant definition is that it generically means color. So we can glean from this definition that it's no mistake that chroma is the life force or energy that painters use to create the sentient worlds within the canvas. In the literal sense, these painters are painting with color, right? That's how painting works, and this is what makes painting special. The inclusion, addition, and intermingling of different colors. Color is what gives a painting its life. And metaphorically speaking, when you say a life has color, that means that it has purpose, meaning, and wonder. So this applies seamlessly to painters painting a canvas as well. I want to end this quick class on Chroma by talking about its relationship to the endings of the game. As somebody who has a video about how I prefer the Mael ending, I have seen many attempted refutations of my personal opinion, ranging from extremely valid and enlightening all the way to deranged, unhinged bullshit. I also see a surprising amount of people who just don't understand how Chroma works or plays into the endings at all. There are 2 misunderstandings that are the most common, so I'll go over them both here. So the first is that Mael can just repaint Lumiere in a new canvas. This is impossible because of the nature of Chroma. There's a fundamental truth to Chroma that you can only grasp if you connect the dots of context because it's never outright stated, and that is that when a painter paints a canvas, its manifestation is wholly unique, and you can consider the Chroma that goes into it the painter pouring a piece of their soul into the work. This is why there are any stakes whatsoever in the game. The real Verso is dead, and this is his only canvas, or the only tangible piece of his soul that continues to exist. So the chroma and life force within is unique and irreplicable. Malleable, yes. We see this with how all the painters influence the chroma throughout the game, but the bottom line is the chroma within cannot exist in another canvas. So no, Mael cannot just paint Lumiere and her friends into another canvas. Now this is actually kind of adjacent to the other common misunderstanding I see, and that is that all of the repainted Expeditioners and Lumierans in Mael's ending are fake or not their original selves because of Renoir's mass Gommage extinction event that ended Act 2. This is of course false. All of the Mael resurrections after Renoir's Gommage are authentic, and the Lumierans who return are their original selves. We know this because when Mael is fleeing from Renoir with Verso, she pauses and says, "I can see them." She then proceeds to focus, and we see her gather up specific chroma before she escapes. This chroma, of course, ends up being Lune and Ciel, and she repaints them into the canvas back at camp. If the resurrections were fake and inauthentic, then there would have been literally zero need for Mael to stop and gather specific chroma. She could have just repainted them wherever and whenever. But what this scene is meant to show us is how chroma is akin to a soul, and of course, each character has a different soul or is comprised of different chroma that is unique to them. If you're one of those people who is irrationally obsessed with the idea that Mael is the devil and nothing she says or does is believable, then I would also like to provide an example from Verso that also supports the concept that I'm discussing. After Painted Verso murders Julie and their friends in a self-defense gone too far, part of how he rationalizes it is he says that Maman will bring you back, which of course means that he intends to get the painters to resurrect Julie and co. In other words, part of the reason he actually murdered them is that in his mind, it was never meant to be permanent, and in a way, he just wanted them to be out of the picture until he could finish helping his mother win the conflict with Renoir, at which point he would get her to repaint Julie. This conveys to us that Painted Verso did 100% view chroma-based resurrections as authentic and viscerally possible. So we have Mael in-game grabbing Ciel and Lune's specific chroma and then bringing them back, and we have Painted Verso giving an account that he views resurrections as legitimate, a belief that he staked the murder of his lover on. So just to summarize, we know that all of the resurrections Mael does are authentic and that she's not creating copies, and we know that she cannot simply paint Lumiere again in a new canvas. At that point, they would be pale, memory-based imitations rather than the same people with the same souls. And we know all of this because the game literally tells us as much if we pay enough attention. We can know all of this if we have a base understanding of what chroma is, how it works, and what it does. And I hope that everyone does now after today's class on chroma. One more detail for the skeptics before we wrap. I know that there are a contingent of you out there who claim that because of the few shots of Lumiere in Mael's ending where there are reused NPCs, that must mean the devs are telling us that Mael's repainting of Lumiere is fake and hollow. Nope, you're wrong. That just comes down to technical limitations and doesn't implicate anything from a narrative perspective. Take a quick look at the intro segment of the game, and if you pay close enough attention, you'll see plenty of reused NPCs in Aline's Lumiere. Anyways, that's all for today. I look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts on this. Certainly let me know if you feel that I missed covering anything in this one. It's an absolute honor to be kicking off 2026 with you all. We are nearly 7,000 people strong at this point on the channel, which is insane and incomprehensible to me. If you're enjoying the discussions in the comments or the videos themselves, definitely subscribe. We'd be honored to have you. It's funny, in our channel Discord, as more people join in, I'm always reminiscing that for about 8 months, it was literally just me and one other person in there. Shout out to Nightman, who joined in the early Metaphor Refantatio days and helped me maintain the belief and exemplify the proof of concept that we could build this channel in its community. Anyways, I'll see you in the comments. I'm infinitely grateful to each one of you for being here. Have a good day, night, or morning, and remember to be kind and thoughtful. Peace.